This was the first time this had ever occurred, ever. And now this is 50 years later, and a lot of these things have occurred since then, similar to, and maybe copycat, or even greater in terms of the devastation that they've caused. But this was just not anything that you could comprehend. Things changed dramatically after that. I mean, dramatically. A friend of mine who was on campus that day, who was a student, called it the day we lost our innocence, because all of a sudden here was a place that you stop and take a nap on a bench on the campus of the university. You sit cross-legged on the grass and read a book. It was just such a quiet, simple, easy time. And now some of those places had pools of blood. So it changed the university dramatically. It changed Austin dramatically, and forever changed people whose lives were dramatically impacted, either families of or the victims themselves who survived. Even to this day, they if not bear the scars, they certainly bear the emotional impact of what had happened to them that day. This was a gun battle that played out in public, with people involved and shooting back and forth. And what happened was, we captured that on film, and all that film showed all of this. Now, you think about the events that have occurred since then. Columbine, where the school shootings took place, that was all inside. Nobody saw anything. Maybe they saw a student jump out of a window just to get away from the shooters. Virginia Tech, all of that took place inside a classroom. And the only pictures that emerged for people to just, relate to that, were cops running around and yellow tape everywhere. So, but this one, the images that our crew filmed that day, all around this campus, showing people hiding and running and scared and getting shot and being rescued. All of that has been out there, and nothing has really come around since those 50 years to compare visually to what occurred at that point, even though a lot of stuff, much more horrendous things have occurred since then. But that really brought it home. And the second thing that I think the reason it stays in the public awareness at this stage is the tower. The tower was the symbol of what happened there. No longer a tower of learning, or to indicate here's this great university, and this tall building was the identifying symbol of the building, but it became a symbol, in addition to the learning, it became a symbol of murder, of killing. After they shot and killed Charles Whitman at the top of the tower, they discovered at that point, and I broadcast the fact that he was killed and at that point, but they discovered that he had a transistor radio at the top of the tower, and he was listening to my broadcast. In other words, their imagery, when they were up there and boom, boom, and put an end to Whitman's siege of horror, there was my broadcast coming out the sound. In addition to gunshots coming from the ground up, there was Spelce there talking on the radio, talking about it. Now, I've often thought, what if I'd known that he was listening to the radio? Would I have done anything different? I doubt it, just because there was no two-way communication. Maybe I could have said something, but I didn't know who was up there. I didn't know what was in that person's mind. I could see him, leaning over the edge, shooting. I knew it was a short, sandy-haired guy who was up there doing this. But beyond that, I had no idea who this guy was. If I had known that he was listening, I've thought about it. What would I say? Well, I could say, stop it. Put your, that wouldn't have had any bearing on it. But the very fact that as my broadcast was going out, it was kind of eerie and creepy to think that this guy was listening to me talk about the damage that he was doing. I said, the sniper is dead. The sniper, Charles J. Whitman from Needville, Texas, is dead. At that moment, it was an amazing sight. Okay, here's that big, vast mall, South Mall, from the tower, between the Capitol and the tower. And all of a sudden, it filled with people. They just came from everywhere, it seemed. I don't know where, but they came out of the buildings, obviously, where they'd been hunkered down and not wanting to get out. But within a matter of minutes, it seemed like, the people came out and just started walking. And there was no sound. It was almost as if they were zombies. They were mesmerized by, here I am standing here, and everybody around. They weren't talking to each other. They weren't hugging each other or anything like that. They were just out there, just what's going on. And then they saw bodies wheeled out on the gurney with sheets covering them. And they were just, again, mesmerized, dumbstruck, couldn't really comprehend what was going on. And I think it was the transistor radios that were in use all around the campus, because that was the only real method of direct communication to so many people at that point that triggered this. And they stood out, and many of them were standing there where dead bodies, pools of blood, they were walking around all that at that time. I got to thinking, well, why did it last so long? Why didn't the police have an arsenal in which to just send the people out, send them right there and start pinning the guy down and stop him long before he was shot? So they said, well, we just didn't have the weapons. So I called around, and I called big cities, called buildings, and asked them. I said, you know, this is what's going on here. You obviously are aware of it. What's in your arsenal? Well, as it turned out, none of them had the capacity to react in such a vein if someone was so far away and picking off targets at will. This was as a result of this. I think it was Los Angeles, the first one. LA created a SWAT team, and SWAT teams came out of that to be able, you know, sharpshooters, police officers trained to handle something like this. None of that had taken place prior to this at all. It didn't seem necessary, but it really certainly seemed necessary after what happened on the University of Texas campus.